Hey, welcome back to another installment of Ask Eddie and Ann. It is my pleasure to be here once again with Ann Hockens, the Director of Communications for the Film Noir Foundation. We now have a regular gig going here answering questions that you good folks submit to us, and let's get it going, Ann. We've missed a while for
Yes.
various reasons, and so we're kind of playing catch up. So, I just want to talk to you about, what did you see this week and what's going on and blah, blah, blah. But maybe we'll get to some of that, but we should maybe dive right into the questions.
Okay, that sounds good to me. So let's see. Our first question is from Brent, and I think someone asked a few months ago why so many film noirs feature Asian characters or Asian art and decor, at least relatively speaking, for the time in Hollywood. If I remember right, you responded that it was for writers and filmmakers to easily add what they thought of as mystery and exoticism to a story set in the US, since both LA and San Francisco have large Asian American populations. Can you share some recommendations for classic film noirs with relatively positive or at least historically interesting depictions of Asian characters?
That's an interesting one. It's funny. Brent sort of answered his own question because he sort of nailed it. So either he was listening when we answered that question before, or he understood completely. Number one on that list is The Crimson Kimono. Sam Fuller's The Crimson Kimono. That's by far the most positive depiction of Japanese American. Other than that, I mean, it gets into pretty dicey territory when you start talking about things like the Shanghai gesture, where, Caucasians are playing the Asians in the movie, and a lot of people don't want to go there. I'll tell you one that pops to mind is Woman on the Run, set in San Francisco, where Victor Sen-Young and Reiko Sato, I believe her name is, have a song and dance team in a Chinatown nightclub, and that really stood out for me because it was a depiction of those characters as Americans.
Yeah,
I mean, the way they were treated in the film was they were not used for that exotica, or if they were completely aware of the fact that that was what they were selling to an audience. And the gag was that as soon as they were off stage, they sounded just like Dennis O'Keefe or Ann Sheridan in the movie. So and you know how much I love that movie, Ann. So I mean, those are the two that pop right out for me. Any that you can think of?
that was actually Woman on the Run was one I was going to point out, and of course Crimson Kimono. I really can't think of any other ones, off the top of my head.
Well, maybe that's sufficient for right now. If anything else pops up, or maybe the good folks that watch this on Facebook are so great. I've noticed some of the threads where people are, answering the questions if we don't do it sufficiently.
Yeah.
I think that's terrific. I think I should explain that today I'm wearing the hat because pandemic hair finally caught up with me. And Kathleen and I have actually been cutting each other's hair since last April. And we've gotten pretty good at it, but as things start to head back to normal, Kathleen's been a little too busy to cut my hair, and so the hat. I break out the hat today because nobody wants to see what it looks like under here.
And this is another question from Brent on the same subject. What are examples of Asian characters in films that are still worth watching, even if they missed the mark? For example, I'm excited to see Anna May Wong in Impact, and she plays an important role in the plot, but knowing her history in Hollywood, I find it kind of heartbreaking how they play jokey Oriental music every time she appears on screen. So what are examples of Asian characters in films that are still worth watching, even if they missed the mark?
Well, I don't know about I mean, I personally don't have a problem watching anything, even if it's offensive. It doesn't I mean, I take it in context. I don't, I might cringe. Like I mentioned, the Shanghai Gesture, that film is like the ultimate in Asian exotica. And something like Singapore with Fred McMurray and Ava Gardner. I mean, I understand that these films are Hollywood's bizarre depiction of these exotic worlds filtered through that lens for consumption by middle America, really. And it's not going to be accurate, but it doesn't completely ruin my enjoyment of the film. So, there are two, the Shanghai Gesture and Singapore. And, I don't even mind watching those old Mr. Moto movies and the Charlie Chan movies because so many great directors got their start. Norman Foster, for one, who directed Woman on the Run, got his start doing those Mr. Moto movies. And, there's some pretty good B films in that bunch if you can tolerate and stomach, watching Warner Oland and people like that play Asians. I understand completely why people are like, I'm not going to watch that. That's insulting. I don't quite have that problem because I'm looking at something else, sort of. So
And
what's your take on that?
well, I mean, I think with the Charlie Chan films, it is because Charlie Chan is always played by, a white actor or actor of European descent. But the kids are played by Chinese American actors, and also the kids are also Americans. I mean, they make a really clear point of that his kids are completely Americanized. And even in one of the films too, one of these characters actually makes fun of like Charlie Chan, and everybody thinks for being Chinese, and everybody thinks he's a jerk, basically. The people on the screen have a very negative reaction to him. So, and it's complicated. And I think also, like, in The Letter, that's another film where there is kind of simultaneously, you see there's definitely a negative feeling towards colonialism. I mean, but then also, the man's Eurasian wife does get her vengeance. So,
but she is played by Gail Sondergaard.
But she's played by Gail Sondergaard, exactly. So it goes kind of back to that. So, those films can, yeah. And I guess for me, it's just, when I'm watching old films, I mean, there's offensive things in them, but I think that it's a mistake for those films to kind of get buried, because then people have to remember the history of the way people have been portrayed traditionally, and also sometimes it's also very, I think, very hypocritical, because like Breakfast at Tiffany's is still considered this great classic, and that has the most racist portrayal of an Asian I have seen in a film. And
that is totally insufferable.
Yeah.
Mickey Rooney is totally insufferable in that. I mean, if it was anybody but Audrey Hepburn in that movie, I probably couldn't watch it.
Yeah.
I mean, she's so great, but I mean, man, he wrecks that movie for me.
Yeah, and there's a really great, in the Bruce Lee biopic Dragon, there's just like this really great scene where he and his wife Linda, before they're actually married, go to the movies, and that's the film they see. And so they just show like Mickey Rooney, and they cut to the actor playing Bruce Lee and his reaction. And it's like, it really just hits home on how those depictions are so, horrible.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange, fascinating aspect of Hollywood history that I find kind of more, it's in no way defensible, really, unless you understand how incredibly racist the culture was, and that Hollywood in many instances was trying its best to do the right thing. And it was just really hard. I mean, when you look at an actor like Sesshu Hayakawa, who was really, really popular in the 1920s, I mean, that was pretty progressive and pretty groundbreaking, and he played, villainous types, but not always.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the, you know, the bitter tea of General Yen, Frank Capra's movie, it's so bizarre because, you know, Barbara Stanwyck falls in love with this, you know, Asian monarch, and he's played by a Swedish guy
Yeah.
who is not only that, he's gay. Nils Astor was gay. So it's like, what do you make of this? Like, you know,
Yeah.
the leading man is played by a closeted gay man who's Swedish, who's playing someone who's Chinese. And it's like, holy cow, this is, it's so complex that how can it not be fascinating in a way? But anyway.
And finally, can you say a few words about Japanese film noir? When did it start? How is it the same or different from Hollywood noir? And what are some good titles to start with?
Oh, it's very hard to say when it started, just like everybody debates that about noir in every country. You know, I keep seeing earlier and earlier examples of it from Japan, but I would say that the wave, you know, the most famous studio is Nikatsu, and it sort of coincided with their juvenile delinquent films. And it definitely was a post-war phenomenon. I mean, obviously Kurosawa made Stray Dog and Drunken Angel in the late 40s, which precede all of that. But the wave of films came in the late 50s and early 60s. And I know it's really pricey now, but there's a beautiful set that Criterion put out years ago of Nikatsu Noir that had, you know, A Colt Is My Passport and Cruel Gun Story and Take Aim at the Police Van, Rusty Knife, and God, why am I forgetting the title of the one that I really love, which is like the love story where the guy thinks his brother is still alive and he's overseas, and it's, oh man, I'm drawing a blank on the title now, and that's embarrassing. But that's really a beautiful film. And all through the 60s, I mean, then the movies get crazy with the Yakuza films and the Suzuki movies, you know, Tokyo Drifter and Branded to Kill and all that stuff. And my personal favorite is Pale Flower, which I just, you know, that may be like in my top 10 of all time. Just not Japanese films, just films in general. I just, Ryo Akebi, the lead in that film, is just so amazing. He's very much the Japanese Robert Mitchum in that movie. You know, so read Noir City, the magazine, because we've had numerous stories about Japanese noir. Imogen Sarah Smith wrote a really great one. Jake Hinkson has written some great pieces about Japanese noir. Nick Feldman recently wrote a piece in tribute to Joe Shishido, who's one of the big stars of 60s Japanese noir, who, you know, lived into his 90s, and Nick's piece sort of, you know, coincided with Joe the Ace, with his death recently. And so, yeah, all those are available in back issues from the foundation. So.
Yeah, and if you go to our filmnoirfoundation.org, we have a Noir City e-magazine page. So that will also show you how to get, how, you know, from there you can go and to the link to where our back issues are sold. And you know, you buy them and it takes a couple of days and you get them. And those are digital, everything's digital. And then from that page also, though, you can also sign up on our email list. And if you donate $20 or more to the Film Noir Foundation, we do send you Noir City magazine, so you can get the issues as they come out.
Thank you, Ann. And this may be a good place to slip this in. This is breaking news. Starting with the next issue, there will be a print edition of the magazine. But here's the deal. If you donate to the foundation, the $20, as you said, you get 4 issues, a year's subscription to the magazine as a premium for donating. The print edition of the magazine is not part of that. We are making a print on demand edition available because people have demanded it, right? So, so you can get it. I mean, it will actually be a tangible thing that you can hold in your hand, but you have to pay for it, right? So that will all be set up. There will be a thing on the site, and it will all be like but it's also going to be designed to be sort of a standalone magazine, not as closely aligned with the foundation. So right now the magazine is like the premium that you get for joining the foundation and donating money to us. If for some inexplicable reason you're one of these people who doesn't want to give to a charitable organization like the Film Noir Foundation, but you want that magazine, you can just buy it, right?
Right.
So that's coming up. So people have that to look forward to.
That's huge. That's really huge, because that's something that we get a lot of comments on the site about.
Yes, I know. And people they don't like to read on screen, so they don't have to. They can read the magazine in print.
Okay. I've been watching Japanese noir on the Criterion channel and wondering what Eddie and Anne feel about films like Pale Flower, Black Water, or Branded to Kill, as well as Japanese noir in general. I have found all three films riveting, but I realize 3 films is a small sample.
Well, this is Japanese noir night here. Yes, it's a small sample, but it's endless. I mean, it's literally endless. If you start getting into Japanese noir, I wish I could. It's over here on the bookshelf somewhere. My friend Chris D wrote a great encyclopedia of Japanese Yakuza films, the gangster movies that it's endless. I mean, I will never be able to see all these movies. If I watched one a day for the rest of my life, I don't think I'd be able to see all these movies. So I say to whoever asked that question, just enjoy. I mean, Criterion has done a great job. They've been the leaders in making Japanese cinema in general available here in the States, but it's endless. It's endless, the amount of great films that you can find.
I was wondering, sorry.
You looked like you were perturbed by this question or something.
No, not at all. By the way, Michael, I think I forgot to say his name. Michael was the person who asked that last question. I was wondering what Eddie considered, that question was already, we answered this question the last time. That's why I got confused. Okay, this is from Bill Artis. A couple of months ago during your intro outro on Noir Alley, you asked, what's he building in there? He doesn't remember what the film is. Was that a shout out to Tom Waits? What other Noir influenced artist albums would you recommend?
Okay. That indeed was a shout out to Tom Waits. I think I even did the Tom Waits voice and that wasn't the only time I've given a shout out to Tom Waits. If I assume this person is a Tom Waits fan, so when I showed Fallen Angel, I pointed out in the outro that I absolutely believe that Fallen Angel, that Tom Waits' song "Invitation to the Blues" was based on Fallen Angel, because there's all kinds of, it's the same basic setup. The guy comes into town on a bus, falls in love with the waitress. Should I stay or should I go? And he name checks, characters from the movie in the song. Mercy, Mercy, Mr. Percy, which is I assumed is a reference to Percy Kilbride, who ran the diner in the movie. So clearly Tom Waits has seen his noir. Another person right off the top of my head that is clearly noir influenced is Stan Ridgway, who his album The Big Heat is clearly, this guy has seen tons and tons of noir. So that's another one. I like Stan Ridgway. He's a Drive, she said. That's a very, very noir song, where a cab driver is a female robber, takes his cab and takes him hostage as the getaway driver. That's a great song. Anyway, those two immediately come to mind.
Yeah, and I just want to let you know that Bill also included this. If Eddie doesn't mention Stan Ridgway, ask, have you listened to Stan Ridgway?
Oh, there you go.
And this is from Paula. What do you think of Republic's noir offering of Port of Thieves? For me, Stephanie Batchelor is a standout as an evil noir villainess. I really like the film, even though a few of the elements are lacking. I understand that Stephanie was connected to some shady characters in Las Vegas. Comment? I don't associate Republic with noir. Did studio make very many noirs?
I don't really know that much about Stephanie Batchelor, so subject for further research, as they say. But it's a good film. It's a good low budget crime picture. Republic did more than a few of those. I think a few months ago we had a question about that, like just in general, about were there any good noir films that came from Republic, and the answer was yes. I'm sure I mentioned that, Moonrise, which is one of my favorite films, was an A picture that came out of Republic, but mostly it was stuff like Lonely Heart Bandits, and which was the first, that I think it was made in 1950, and that was the first movie made based on the story of Martha Beck and Ray Fernandez, the Honeymoon Killers.
Yeah.
Which has been done 4 times. There are 4 versions of that story. I think 4, maybe 5 now. Alleluia, which came out maybe 5 or 6 years ago, was another version of that story. And then Lonely Hearts with Salma Hayek and James Gandolfini was a version of that story. Honeymoon Killers, Deep Crimson by Arturo Ripstein was also a version of that same story. And Lonely Heart Bandits, which was the first one that was made just like 6 or 8 months after they had their crime spree, after they were brought to justice. So I'm assuming most people watching know what I'm talking about, but if not, you can, I get Honeymoon Killers is by far the most famous of those movies, which actually showed on TCM recently, which kind of blows my mind.
Wow, I'm a little surprised by that, frankly. I think it's a great film, but I'm just a little surprised it was on
But
TCM.
I'm sure there were some fans of screwball comedies and things that stumbled across Honeymoon Killers and didn't know what the hell was going on. Anyway, I don't know how I got off on that from a question about Republic and Stephanie Batchelor and Port of Thieves, but I haven't seen Port of Thieves in like 10 or 12 years, so it's not fresh in my mind, but I recall thinking it was pretty good.
Okay. And this is from Bob. Just watched noir film Black Angel for the first time. I was favorably impressed with one of my very favorite actors, Dan Duryea, in a character of a no good slimeball. He's not an okay. I'm hoping he's number 5. Okay. I was disappointed though by Peter Lorre, another favorite, but who, in my opinion, was not his often portrayed menacing character. I've not read the 1943 original Woolrich novel, so would like to learn your take as to whether Lorre's character actually coincided with what Woolrich intended for his Mr. Marco character, Bob.
Okay, well, I'm going to answer that real quickly, so then I can turn the floor over to you, Anne, to defend the honor of your boyfriend, Dan Duryea. I have no recollection of the character in the novel. I mean, I read the novel, I'm going to say 25, 30 years ago, so I have no recollection of that character in the novel. But I will say this, that the casting of Peter Lorre, sometimes he was cast specifically to be a red herring, right? I mean, that was the purpose. He was so synonymous with shady, sinister characters that you would put him in the film and then he would turn out to not be a shady, sinister character. And that was kind of the point, right? I mean, in Black Angel, you assume that as soon as you see him in the nightclub, when Duryea and June Vincent go in there, like, this guy is the culprit for some reason. He has to be the guy responsible, and he turns out to just be a nightclub owner. He's not really the sinister character. which I thought was kind of clever. You know, it's like casting Broderick Crawford as the cop, you know, before he did Highway Patrol, where
Yeah.
you're like, this guy's a thug. I mean, he's the cop. So that's my take on that. Okay, now on to your defense of Dan Duryea in this movie.
Yeah, and I would like to point out something about the novel, which is in the novel, she goes through a series of suspects, and really the movie is just takes one of those and then makes it the whole film. And it's a big change from the original novel to the
Because
to
the
movie.
June Vincent character is more of the protagonist of the novel, right?
Yeah.
Which was pretty common with Woolrich. I mean, he more than any other writer who's synonymous with noir, except maybe James M. Cain, he had female protagonists, right? I mean, in The Bride Wore Black and Rendezvous in Black and all, you know, crazy people most of the time, but female protagonists. So that's kind of interesting. That what was his name in the movie? Marty Blair or something like that. Yeah, and maybe I should stop talking about it now because people haven't seen the movie. I was just about to give away the whole plot, don't, so I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, and also as you pointed out, those other two novels are also Rendezvous and Black and The Bride Wore Black are also structured the same way, where you're going through her having a series of interactions with people. So it's that kind of, you know, that same. I can't think of the word.
Structure, anyway, the same structure.
Yeah.
And I believe that's because Woolrich, you know, was such a pulp writer that he was used to writing that in that episodic style.
Yeah.
Right. That everything was like, well, this little section is going to focus on this, and then he would move on to the next episode. Right. And they don't flow smoothly, but that's the way his stories were. That was the whole concept, right? Is everybody was a suspect and you move from one to the next. And yeah, it's pretty intriguing.
Yeah, it would make a great, any of his novels would be good for like HBO. You know how they do stuff now like that, where it's like a limited series and each episode is.
Yes. I mean, they're tricky. Nobody's ever made Rendezvous in Black because you kind of can't do it. Because it's a mystery as to which character is the protagonist. In each chapter of the book, it focuses on the suspect who comes in contact with this other person who is in disguise.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And would be very, very. See, The Bride Wore Black is different because it's, you know, you're following the same Julie, the same character through the whole book, you know, going after these men, right? It's the original Kill Bill, and or Promising Young Woman, as I pointed out before. But Rendezvous in Black, which I love because it works specifically as a book because you can only see it in your head. There's no actual visualization that would spoil everything. So anyway.
Yeah. So getting back to Dan Duryea's character in the film, and character as a no good slime ball is like, that took my breath away. Like I was so shocked that anybody would look at that character in that movie. And
he's very empathetic, right? You feel sorry for him.
I think it's the most, well, no, Chicago Colin is probably his most sympathetic character. Yes. I mean, his character is flawed if he's an alcoholic. But I mean, just his whole arc in that story where he just becomes so, you know, in love with this woman and straightens himself out and, you know, is finally moving past his very bitter divorce from the woman who's murdered at the beginning of the film. So right. Yeah, I was just shocked by that because that is by far his most, I think, one of his most sympathetic characters.
And it's interesting that he would say that because when Black Angel was released, it was a big deal that he was playing a sympathetic character for a change, because right, he had made Scarlet Street or Woman in the Window, and then Scarlet Street and Ministry of Fear, and he was a sleazeball in all those films. And then in Black Angel, he was not. And it's also the first film in which he didn't slap a woman.
Yeah, which is actually brought out. I can't believe it in the publicity materials. They made like this big deal that like he didn't hit her.
June Vincent survived undamaged from her encounter with Dan Duryea, you know.
Okay. This is from Bill. Eddie has boxing history in his background, with his father working as a sports writer, and Eddie's two novels, The Distance and Shadowboxer. I have both of them. That's what Bill says. I do not have both of them. Does Eddie follow current boxing today? I suspect he has Max Kellerman-esque knowledge of the sport.
I do follow it. I don't follow it religiously any longer. I mean, I know who's who and who the best fighters are, and you know, I'm a big Bud Crawford fan, and you know, I can't believe that Manny Pacquiao is going to fight Errol Spence. That's kind of a ridiculous thing, but anyway, yes, I do follow the sport. I have a hard time because I don't have a lot of friends nearby. I have a very hard time paying pay-per-view prices to watch a big fight because I can't share the cost with people. Either I'm going to just watch it by myself or not. And sometimes it's like, you can't look, I've been a fan long enough that you can't trick me with a dud fight. Yeah. Right. I'm not going to pay $75 or something to watch a pay-per-view fight that I know is just a dud. Like, I would not watch when they did that Roy Jones, Mike Tyson thing. It was like, I am not paying money to watch two old men stage an exhibition. I mean, it's like, this is embarrassing, you know? Yeah. So anyway, I don't want to get off on the boxing thing too much, but yes, I do continue to follow the sport.
Okay. And this one is from Paul. As a huge film noir junkie, I noticed that a lot of the bad girls in film noir are either sent to or threatened to be sent to Tehachapi, the most memorable being the end of the Maltese Falcon. Why is it so prominently featured in film noir? Is it because most film noirs were made in California? Also, since Tehachapi is mentioned so often in these movies, and many viewers may not understand the connection, maybe an explanation can be made on one of your Sunday shows while showing a movie that contains a reference to Tehachapi.
Okay, that's an interesting question. I believe it's so common in the films because Tehachapi opened contemporaneously with the making of all these films. It was a big deal that there was a women's correctional institution. That was a big deal, and it was newsworthy, and they incorporated it into a lot of the films. I don't believe, I don't know this for certain. Somebody's going to look it up. But when Hammett wrote the Maltese Falcon, Tehachapi did not yet exist. So when they got around to making the film in 1941, I believe that Tehachapi had just opened. I mean, like, just opened. But the ultimate film in that regard is the story of Molly X with June Havoc, where she goes to Tehachapi. That's a Crane Wilbur movie, and he made more prison movies than anybody else. And that's like his ultimate, well, I can't say it's his ultimate women in prison movie, because there's a couple other ones he did as well. But, and the whole movie doesn't take place there, but she is sent to Tehachapi in the, like at the, I don't know, you know, a third of the way into the movie or something. And she ends up having a fight with, I think it's Dorothy Hart is the other woman in the film. And they have the greatest women's brawl in the history of Hollywood movies. In the yard at Tehachapi. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and that film also features The Top of the Mark. And also, it was one of only about 2 films that Elliot Lewis actually appeared in, and he was a extremely famous radio actor who played Remley on the Jack Benny Show, but was also, they called him Mr. Radio because he was also a writer and director and producer in radio, and was one of the most important figures in old-time radio.
I had no idea. So what does he have a significant role in Story of Molly X?
He is one of the gang.
Oh,
And
okay.
he
Okay.
kind of has a crush on her. He's dark. He's got beautiful dark
Okay.
hair. So
Okay.
that's who he is. But yeah, I mean, that's actually why I originally watched the film. Was I was desperate to track down a copy because he had done that like in a mom Pa Kettle film. Like that was the
Yeah.
only
Yeah.
stuff he did.
It's
And he,
yeah, it's a universal picture. I've shown it once at Noir City, and the print was really good. And unfortunately, it's never come out on DVD or anything. And it's a good film. I mean, it's really
yeah,
interesting. And because it's a female criminal, it's kind of an unrepentant female
hmm
criminal. You know, her husband leads this gang, this robbery gang, and then one of the members of the gang kills him. And then she figures out who it is, and then guns the guy down in cold blood, and ends up getting arrested for it and going to prison. And she's completely unrepentant through the whole thing. And the woman she ends up brawling with is the guy's mall.
yeah.
Her husband's murderer. This is his girl, and they carry the fight to the yard. It's absolutely great. June
Yeah,
Havoc is terrific. I really like her.
yeah, she really is, and that was such a plum role for her, and it's so unusual to see that kind of female protagonist in a film noir. And you also see a little bit too, which I think is good, is what it's like for her, wrangling these men as a female, being kind of head of these guys and dealing with that too. It's really
Yeah,
well
yeah.
done.
I enjoy that film.
Um,
We've got a groomer in the back there. Is that Charlotte?
that is Charlotte. Yeah.
Charlotte's putting on a show. It's
Yes.
good. It's good. She's like, finally, I got the couch to myself.
Yeah, she really likes it. Emily's probably asleep in the bedroom. And this one is from Liz. I just read a wonderful book called The Dark Galleries, a museum guide to painted portraits in film noir by Stephen Jacobs and Lisa Colpert. This has drawn my attention to the emphasis on art and artists in film noir, more than I believe in any other genre. What accounts for this? Is it the dualist nature that portraits can reflect, or their heightened artificiality?
Once again, we had a
We
story
had an
about
article on
this
this one of our
in
magazines.
the magazine. Yeah, Imogen again. Imogen's always right on it. She
Mm-hmm.
wrote a really good article about portraits in noir.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to say, like, why is this? I think that the question of identity is so prevalent in noir. Like,
Yeah.
are you the person you think you are? And then it just stands to reason that you're going to have artists do this representational portrait, and it's either going to like shock the person, like that's not me, or it represents, and off the top of my head, I mean, I can just think of so many of these. I mean, there's obvious ones like, Scarlet Street and Portrait of Jenny, which is not actually a noir. But what's the two Mrs. Carols, obviously. The locket. The locket
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
the portrait featured prominently. And there's a really fun movie from Warner Brothers called Whiplash with Dane Clark and Alexis Smith, where he's a painter and he paints this portrait of Alexis Smith that figures in the movie. I know there's a bunch of others. And also there's an interesting backstory about the guy who painted a lot of these in Hollywood, John Decker, who is quite a noir story in and of himself. He was
Yeah.
big drinking buddies with a lot of those big stars, David Niven and Errol Flynn and those guys. And he could paint in any style. So if you look him up online, you'll see some of his famous portraits of actors that are absolutely gorgeous, but then he could adjust and paint anything. Like he painted all the stuff that Edward G. Robinson supposedly painted in Scarlet Street.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I wish I could remember what the movie was, but somebody the other day sent me a clip, just a short clip from a film where the camera was going past an art gallery in the movie, and in the window was one of the paintings from Scarlet Street.
Oh, wow.
The picture that like makes Catherine March famous. It was like a subway with a snake, with the snake, and the snake had an apple in its mouth. And that same painting was used in another film. And this guy saw it and like captured it and sent me the video and said, "Hey, recognize this?" I said, "Wow, that's wild." You know, and I think some of those Decker paintings actually came up for auction maybe 7 or 8 years ago at like Heritage Auction or something. Like there was a whole collection of his work, and a lot of the stuff that was featured in noir films. The portrait of the woman that's in the cell block in Brute Force that all the guys look at, that was John Decker. He painted that.
Yeah, and I feel like we may have also had an article about Decker in a previous
I think so
magazine as well.
Yeah, in one of the earlier issues.
In one of the really early ones. Yeah,
there was an article about him. Yeah.
Yeah, and
interesting guy.
Yeah, and in the subject of portraits, I mean, I think also like I think one of the best uses of portraits in noir is Laura. Because
how did I miss that one?
Yeah, I mean, because our protagonist sort of falls in love with her portrait, but also to me, that was also sort of interesting too, this idea of a portrait of her, because the person who painted it, and that backstory is also told within the story, but also that concept of all these people in her life see her in a different way too, you know, and it's not that she's duplicit, it's that people all see her in a different way and really want different things from her as well.
Yep.
You know,
I mean, you're right. I mean, that's the most famous portrait in noir, obviously. It's kind of a cheat though, because I was so disappointed when I found out it was a photograph that was painted over.
Yeah.
Instead of an actual portrait, you know. So anyway.
Okay. Eddie and Ann, how would you classify Possessed, which I watched again on TCM? It seems like a domestic drama, a woman's picture, a love triangle, a mental illness picture, a glamorous atmospheric picture, even a horror film. A lot of it is silly if we analyze what is happening, but we don't want to analyze. Joan Crawford is so stunning and compelling. I neglected to mention A Murder Story too. P.S. Maroney Olson is great as a doctor who a desperate Joan consults and lies to. So what do you think it is? Right? Is it all those
I'm not
things?
sure what the question is. Is it? Well, I mean, I showed it. I think maybe it's coming up. It's coming up this month, later this month on Noir Alley. I'm showing it again.
Yeah.
It may even be by the time this is posted, it may have already shown. I don't know. I'm showing it. Memorial Day is Act of Violence, and then the week after that is Possessed, which I showed the first season. So that should indicate, you know, that I think it's a really good film. I think it's probably Curtis Bernhardt's best directed movie. I think his direction is stunning for the way he depicts her state of mind subjectively. I think it's totally a film noir. How could it not be? I mean, it's about a person whose passion and obsession drives them to murder.
Yeah.
Isn't that the plot of most noir films? But it's just funny because when that's a woman in that role, for whatever reason, people think, oh, but it's a melodrama or a woman's picture or something. And it's like, are we watching the same movie? I mean, wow, that opening where she's wandering in the streets and gets on the streetcar, David, are you David? It's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
And she is brilliant in that movie. Absolutely brilliant. Should have won the Oscar.
Yeah, it's amazing. It is just, she's incredible in it. That opening sequence is still one of my favorite openings of any film. I think it's brilliant. I like it because it kind of takes a while before you start to realize how much of it's being told from her perspective and that she's like a faulty narrator essentially.
Yes.
And I also glad you brought up the point because it's something that frustrates me continually. is when it's a female protagonist in a film noir, people always call it a melodrama or a women's picture.
Something else.
It's just there's something else. And yeah, it's just very frustrating. So I'm glad you said
I mean,
that.
I say that all the time, and I don't, it doesn't bother me to reiterate it, because I find that what I think we're trying to do is sort of revisit decades and decades of film, quote unquote, scholarship that I think was inherently biased in a very male centric way.
Yeah.
And decided that noir was about, male fragility or
Yeah.
something. And it's like, well, it's actually bigger than that. This whole thing about it had to do with men after the war feeling, disenfranchised and or emasculated because women were now in the workplace and all. I mean, that is such an easy and simplistic read of what was going on. And if you think that that's what motivated writers in Hollywood to tell stories,
Yeah.
I mean, guess again. So, yeah, all of those Stanwyck movies, the Crawford movies, all of that stuff. I mean, that's noir, man. Strange Love of Martha Ivers is a film noir.
Oh yeah.
That is not a
100%.
woman's melodrama.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. No, I'm not getting an argument. And I think too, like I said, I know we talked about all these fantastic women crime writers from that period and the way they've just sort of been written out. And if you actually like look at the credits of films, you see all, movie after movie after movie based on all these women's novels. And, boy, the way things sort of came about, you'd think that only, and Woolrich was also very sidelined as well up until recently, even though I don't think there's a single writer who's probably, that there are more film noirs based on than Cornell Woolrich.
No,
he's probably the most, actually, if we're really talking about, he's probably the most important novelist in terms of film noir. And not just novels or short stories, and he had a huge impact on radio drama as well.
Absolutely. I think until Stephen King came along, I think Cornell Woolrich was probably the most adapted genre writer, certainly.
Yeah.
And genre writers write more than anybody else. So it's like, why am I qualifying it by calling him a genre writer, right? He's the most adapted novelist or story writer, storyteller, up until Stephen King. I think Stephen King has actually had many more things turned into films by now. But yeah, Woolrich was incredible. And Georges Simenon is in that group as well, because if you count the adaptations of Woolrich that were done overseas, there's even more. And then the same thing is true of Georges Simenon. Between all the Maigret novels and then all the standalone novels that have been adapted since, I just showed the Brothers Rico on TCM, which is a Simenon, and starting in 1932 was the first novel of his that was adapted, and they're still adapting them today. Right? There's probably 3 Simenon books in production now. So he may be the king, who knows?
And this is from John. When you showed Danger Signal back in September 2020, a group of friends and I noted the mention of thin cakes as a delicacy for the in and hip crowd. We've wondered ever since, just what were these thin cakes back in the day?
I wish I knew. I could probably make something up, but I honestly don't know what thin cakes are. We're going to have to look that up and see if we can puzzle it out. I mean, it's got to be some kind of like it'd be like a wafer or something, right? I don't know. But then a wafer isn't really a cake. So I don't know, like lady fingers. That always killed me that there were these desserts called lady fingers. It's like, ugh. That's kind of creepy, lady fingers. Oh, I'm not eating that.
Okay, and this is from Jessica. Hi, Eddie and Ann. I happily used a noir for an ethics question, and I would love to hear both your views on it. The question, slightly reworded, was to pick a film, any film that identified the primary ethics reflected: virtue ethics, honesty, generosity, kindness,
Leaves out noir.
yeah, that's what she said. Teleological ethics, consequences over morals, like fibbing to save a life. Deontological ethics, morals, duty over consequences, not fibbing, and a murderer is released.
Well, wait, so she did this, but she doesn't say what the film is that she used as an example?
I was curious, what film, noir or not, would you pick to discuss one of these schools of ethics?
Huh. That's interesting. Well, the one that immediately pops to mind is, the Hitchcock film, I Confess.
Yeah.
But that is somewhat complicated by the fact that he has taken, the vows, because, Montgomery Clift, Michael Logan, I think the character's name is, because he's a priest, he cannot reveal what was told to him in the confessional. And so he knows who the killer is, and yet he refuses to reveal it. So that, that's right there. But that's kind of compounded by, his religion. Isn't that the theme kind of The Unfaithful? Doesn't Anne Sheridan sort of know who? I'm trying to remember the premise of that, because it's like the letter. It's the same as the letter. This is a very heady question.
Yeah.
I'm used to simple things. This is a heady question. But I don't know why I'm having trouble coming up with an answer, because this question is like at the root of every noir film, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm. Yeah.
I mean, I want to say it's also like, it feels like In a Lonely Place somewhat, like the whole character of Dick Steele sort of has this moral quandary thing, but then again, they don't know who the killer is in that film, so
right.
I don't know. I'm gonna stick with I Confess, unless you can come up with a better one.
I feel like there's something like, I feel like it's always sort of the opposite. I'm trying to think if there's anything about like virtue ethics where someone's honest, generously, kindness. Yeah, I can't think of it. This is too hard for me.
Well, because there's just so many films to, but there are the ones where, an otherwise decent person suddenly does the despicable thing and knows that someone is innocent and lets them be found guilty, right? I mean, I've seen that a number of times as well, and you just know that karma is going to come back to get him. I guess that's more common than the other one, which is, protecting the guilty party as opposed to setting up an innocent party to be found guilty. That's a fairly common theme in noir. Anyway, sorry, Jessica, that's the best I can do on short notice.
I was completely stumped. This is from Juanita. Eddie, at the end of the letter, Betty Davis' character is murdered by the Asian woman. I get their death is an eye for an eye. I can't figure out, and it's not made clear, if she and the houseboy are caught and arrested by the policeman that comes to the property as they're leaving after the murder.
I don't think that's made clear at all.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's any suggestion of that. But if they're saying, like, how could that get past the production code? I'm going to suggest two things. Number one, the movie is not set in the United States of America. So that's another example of Hollywood and its suggestion that, you know, life is cheap in the Orient, you know,
Yeah.
that they can get away with a murder and nobody cares. And number two, that's a William Wyler film, and the ordinary rules do not apply to William Wyler. I mean,
Yeah.
at that point, he had established himself as probably, you know, if not a director in Hollywood, one of the 5 or 6 top directors in Hollywood, and studios would back him, and they would fight for Wyler to get his vision of the film up on screen, so he could get away with things that other people could not. But first and foremost, it's because that movie is not set in the United States of America.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, at the end of Casablanca, Claude Rains' character opens a bottle of Vichy water. He takes one drink and throws the remainder of the bottle into the wastebasket, kicks it over, and walks off with Humphrey Bogart. What is the significance of that gesture by Rains?
That's interesting. I wonder how old the person asking this question is. Because, you know, Vichy water, they're, you know, the Vichy were the collaborationists in the war, and it was just a very symbolic way of Claude Rains to who was totally you know, exploiting the situation to his benefit in Casablanca as the head of police, but that was a very simple, beautifully written, symbolic way of saying, you know, I'm with you now, Rick, and you know, the hell with these collaborationists, by just tossing the Vichy water away. That was that's screenwriting, man. That's really good screenwriting.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is stuff like that, little details like that can mean so much at the time. Decades go by, and it's like, what's Vichy water? Why, you know, why does that matter? You know, what's the big deal? I'm trying to think of what would be the equivalent today, you know, but it's something that is like, you know, I had my great nieces over to visit recently, and I sat there at the dinner table with them, and I had no idea what they were talking about. I mean, none, zero. They're just talking all about this stuff that, you know, what's new and all this stuff that they've seen on the internet and that they've been watching. And it's like, I don't have the slightest idea what they are talking about. So if somebody did a story about any of the stuff that they were mentioning, I would have no clue. And that's today. God, so what's it gonna be like 20 years from now? I mean, is this stuff gonna make any sense? I don't know. Sorry, I just had to digress there for a second. I felt so old. I
bet you did. No, I mean, that's always how it is. You know, somebody says something, you realize you have like no idea what the hell they're talking about.
None.
Just completely lost touch with.
But if I talked about Vichy water, they wouldn't know what I was talking about, you know? So there you go.
A few months ago, a viewer offered a question that intrigued me. The question was, which film stars today would have made great noir actors in the 40s and 50s? I have a few suggestions and want to hear your feedback. A young Mel Gibson, Russell Crowe, Brad Pitt, and Bruce Willis. Start with those and go on.
So my opinion about those?
Yeah, I mean, Mel Gibson did neo-noirs when he was younger.
He sure did. You know, I don't, I mean, the longevity that a lot of these actors enjoy today is kind of a tip-off that they probably would have worked in other eras as well.
Yeah.
The guy that I recently saw that I just was like, man, I watched the film Croupier again with Clive Owen.
Clive Owen.
Clive Owen is so fantastic in that movie. Yeah. And even my wife, you know, Kathleen, was watching this film with me, and she said, this guy kind of has a Robert Mitchum thing going on, you know? Yeah. And it was really intriguing to me because, you know, I hadn't seen that film in a while, and man, it's good. It's so well written, and it's deep. That movie is really kind of deep. And when it starts, he's got the platinum blonde hair, and he is so much of like the late 80s. Yeah. And he's got like the Boy George hat that he's wearing and the whole thing. And it's like, this is a time capsule of that period. but then he becomes the croupier, and he puts the tuxedo on, and he lets his hair go black, and he combs it back, and it's just like, this guy, boom, could totally be a movie star in the 1940s, you know, immediately. So Clive Owen is one. You know, Brad Pitt seems, he doesn't have as much as I enjoy watching him on screen, I have a hard time seeing somebody who's built like that in movies of an earlier era. You know, he's so wiry. I guess Dan Duryea was kind of wiry, but you know, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think Brad Pitt also has a very like, there's like a very contemporary. He has a very contemporary. Something about him is very contemporary. Like, to me, he doesn't feel like a classic actor. You know, I think like,
and part of that is because the way you see him off screen, where he's just so casual. He's got the t-shirt and the lank hair and everything, and it's like he couldn't care less, you know. You know who I would include in that, because I just saw him last night, and I could really digress here, but Daniel Day-Lewis is inarguably one of the greatest actors ever. And I just think that he could totally have worked in any era. If you put him in the 1800s on stage, he's gonna be perfectly fine. If you put him in silent films, he's gonna be perfectly fine. I mean, that guy is extraordinary. So, you know, I revisited Gangs of New York. Which I did not really like when it first came out. It just kind of, it was so intense, and I was you're so overwhelmed by the production design and everything, that it was just like, God, this movie is killing me. It's so exhausting. But I had reason to revisit it because I'm reading a book about the life and work of Stephen Crane, you know, the Red Badge of Courage. And of course he, you know, was writing at that time, like in the 1860s. And so when I saw the Gangs of New York was on, I said, oh, cool. Stephen Crane lived in New York at that time. I'll watch this again. Wow, that movie is extraordinary. And it totally ahead of its time, because it's now. I mean, the whole thing, you know, the Bowery Boys and all those gangs, it's the Proud Boys and all this stuff, and the anti-immigrant stuff. And it's amazing how timely that film is now. And it was made in 2002. And, you know, Bill the Butcher, my God, Daniel Day-Lewis is terrifying in this movie. And anyway, I'm getting off the subject here, but yeah, I would say Daniel Day-Lewis can do anything in any era.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. He's a really brilliant actor. And I think that, I mean, honestly, the reason why I haven't seen the movie you're just talking about, The Gangs of New York, was I understood that sort of he's the main antagonist, and then Leonardo DiCaprio, who I think is a good actor, was the protagonist. And I just didn't think that was going to work in terms of. I didn't think it would work. Those two squaring off.
I kind of felt that way the first time I saw it, and then that's the point. But that is the point.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, it probably works
because you're never supposed to believe that this kid can stand up to Bill the Butcher, who is the most horrifying, you know, based on a real person. You know, William Poole was the actual Bill the Butcher. And you know, just the boss of the 5 Points in New York. And you're supposed to be terrified for this kid because there's no way he can possibly go up against this guy. And that is the point of the film. So that was not an issue this time around.
I think Tom Cruise, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, and Dustin Hoffman could play Noir, and they were all on Neo. Well, Tom Cruise.
Yeah, they all have done Noir.
Noir, yeah. But it would depend on the part in the script. Two other actors who I think are borderline suggestions for earlier noir films, so classic era, let's say classic era noir films, are Harrison Ford and Liam Neeson. Yeah, I totally agree on those two. I mean, especially Liam Neeson, I think would have been fantastic.
Well, isn't Liam Neeson doing like B movies?
Yeah, he is.
Today. I mean, he just does these, you know, yeah, give me back my daughter. You know, I mean, this is it. He is that guy. So absolutely, I can see that clearly. You know that Clive Owen, not that long ago, bought the rights to all the Raymond Chandler novels.
No,
he wanted to play Philip Marlowe, and
it would have been really good.
Never happened. And this will show you how fast time flies.
Yeah.
When he did that, he could have played Marlowe, but that was 10 or 12 years ago, and he's too old now. I mean, because you know my feeling, like Robert Mitchum was like way too old to play that character in Farewell My Lovely. But you know, a lot of people loved it because it was like the part he was born to play. But he was just, you know, Marlowe was a rapidly aging young man in the books. He was not a weary old guy who'd seen it all. So yeah, Clive Owen would have been very good.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Joaquin Phoenix would be an interesting choice for that too.
You know, he's a really compelling actor.
He is.
I like him a lot. He has tremendous range. I haven't seen him in that one by Lynn Ramsey yet. The one where he is the guy who goes to save the young girl.
I haven't watched it yet either, and it's supposed to be fantastic. She's a great director.
Yeah, I like her stuff very much. Anyway, okay, moving on.
Okay, Eddie, do ratings matter on Noir Alley? What I'm asking is, do the head honchos at TCM ever pressure you to put on a popular noir?
No, absolutely not. I don't know how the ratings work with TCM. There are no ratings per se, like the Nielsen ratings or anything like that, but they do tend to know who's watching, because they can tell when the audience spikes and when the audience diminishes, right? So Noir Alley, you know, come on, it's on at midnight and 7 a.m. So the ratings don't really matter, because there's an awareness that a lot of people are recording the shows and watching it later. I mean, that's accepted. But no, I get no pressure at all to show anything on Noir Alley. None. Zero. People think that when I like show like Gilda or something, they'll say, oh, they must have forced him to do it because they've shown this, you know, and it's like, no, I want to show Gilda because I haven't talked about it. Yeah. I haven't introduced the film before. So, you know, that's why I will show a movie that maybe has been seen elsewhere on TCM, because I want to put my spin on it and talk about it. So, but not in the least. It's quite the opposite. I'm the one who comes to them and says, can we show this? Yeah. Like in July, the fact that I'm going to show Los Tallos Amargos, the Argentine film that the Film Noir Foundation restored. That's my idea. Yeah. Right? So, and they indulge me these things regularly, so it's great.
Right. And before I started watching Noir Alley, I knew very little about the genre, which I just want to stop there. And I think that's something you do both at Noir City and on Noir Alley. Is it's good to have a mix of stuff, even if it's like, of course, if you're a big noir fan, it's like, oh, I've seen this 1,000 times. But when you're really showing, you got to remember, not everybody who comes to Noir City or watches Noir Alley has seen all this stuff. It's new to them. Anyway, sorry. I think you've done an exemplary job in educating and informing the public on the debt of the genre. Therefore, has there ever been any thought or discussion of creating a noir 24/7 channel like TCM that could show all these lost films with someone like yourself introducing them and even covering the genre like a history class on the subject?
Here's the deal. It's like, I don't want to sound like I'm Forrest Gump or something, but film is like a box of chocolates, right? You want to eat one good chocolate a week.
Yeah.
Or have a festival where you've got a nice smorgasbord of things that you can enjoy. But 24/7, I think is going to wear out its welcome. As much as we love this, you know, the great success of Noir Alley, and it has been a big success on TCM, is that it's on once a week.
Yeah.
I mean, that well, twice a week technically, but it's the same film.
Yeah.
It's rare for cable TV when you can watch stuff on demand. It's rare to have destination TV.
Yeah.
You know, where because now with Netflix and everything, it's just like, oh, I want to watch this TV series, I'll just binge watch it.
Yeah.
You know, nobody is like, oh, it's Sunday night at 8 o'clock. It's time to watch. You know, that's why I loved it when David Lynch did Twin Peaks: The Return, and it was like, there's no binging this. You have to tune in every week at the same time to watch this show, and that commitment was part of it because it allowed for so much discussion between the episodes so that people could process it and talk about it and come up with theories, which made it a totally interactive experience. And I think in some respects, the same is true with Noir Alley. So I would not want to do the show 24/7. I would not want to do like a noir network or something like that, because you're just going to run out of stuff really fast. You're just going to burn people out.
If this was from Eric Davidson, can Eddie discuss some of his favorite beatnik exploitation moments in early 50s noir?
Beatnik exploitation moments. That I didn't know there was such a thing.
Neither did I.
Obviously, when you say early 50s, the moment is in DOA in the Fisherman. You know, where
Yeah.
you know, go man, hey, dig that what that guy's putting down, man. Hugh O'Brien, in fact, is the Hep Cat in that scene, who's digging that. But then, you know, I love the Beat Generation with Steve Cochran and Mamie Van Doren and God, I'm forgetting the other actor's name now. Jesus, come on, Ed. But that's like a real goofy movie that totally exploits the beatnik thing. You know, there's a lot of those. They're all kind of goofy. I don't know that there was ever one that was kind of legitimate that treated it respectfully. You know, there was no Jack Kerouac movie made in the 1950s, right? But yeah, that moment in DOA is priceless.
Yeah.
You know, with the all black band and all the white hipsters, you know.
Yeah.
Get it, man. Come on, lay it down, cat.
Dennis, are there any examples of odd colors used for clothing or props in film noir to give the atmosphere in black and white, like George Reeves' brown and gray Superman suit? Or would the sets on something like the Maltese Falcon have been painted in shades of gray? I tend to picture the guy suits in neutral colors, but Rita Hayworth's dresses, I wonder.
Interesting question. The cinematographers knew what, and there were filters that they could use so that they could check before they shot a scene so that they would know how this was going to look in black and white. But I don't believe ever that they actually painted anything in shades of gray to get an effect for black and white film. And it's known that, you know, red photographs a certain way, blue photographs differently in black and white. It's always interesting to me when there's something in a black and white film where color plays an important part. And you know, where they'll talk about a woman being a redhead or a certain dress, like in The Killers, when they constantly are referring to the green. You know, Kitty Collins is associated with green and the shamrocks and the harp and the club and green, green. Everything is green, and you never see it. You know. Anyway, so the cinematographers knew what they were doing, and they understood how colors separated and read in black and white.
Yeah, and the famous example of that, of course, is the red ball gown in Jezebel was not actually red.
Exactly.
Can you just give me I'm so sorry. Emily has been like meowing in the hallway like nonstop for like the past 10 minutes. Emily, come here. Come here. I'm in here. Okay.
Will she come?
She usually does. Especially when she's
Well,
been
we'll
crying
see. This
like
may
that.
be. This is very exciting to see if this very suspenseful to see if Emily will make an appearance.
It's just super distracting. You guys probably can't hear her, but it's like this nonstop thing.
Well, we're very lucky that we're recording this not at Tizzy's dinner time.
Does she get really? Oh yeah.
Yeah, it would be driving me insane. Okay.
Okay, let's keep going. This is from Aaron and Kathy. The topic of historical or costume drama noir came up at a recent Ask Eddie. We recently viewed the 1979 BBC production of Therese Raquin from the Emile Zola novel. It begins with the themes echoing The Postman Always Rings Twice and ends up with the same energy of detour. Have you seen or read this material? And if so, would you consider it proto-noir? What are the chances that James M. Cain had read Zola?
Thank God they put that tag at the end, because otherwise I was lost on this question.
Yeah.
Because no, I haven't seen it and I'm not familiar with it, but I do know that James M. Cain certainly had read Zola.
Yeah.
No question about it. And I'll look this up and do some research on it, but I have not seen it. But I have no doubt that Zola was one of the inspirations for Cain when he wrote Postman.
Yeah, and I've actually
because of course Zola was La Bête Humaine, that they turned Human Desire, the Fritz Lang version, and then the Jean Renoir version before that with Gabin. Those all feel like a James M. Cain.
Yeah, and I've read this novel, and yes, it does. It just feels like a noir.
Okay, really does. There you go, Anne. You should have just taken over that one, because I have not read that novel and I don't know it.
And this is from our friend and former Miss Noir City, Aja.
Ah, yes.
I know. It's more folk horror than noir, but I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on Midsommar, particularly in the context of the classic noir femme fatale.
Have not seen it. Sorry to say, Aja, I have not seen the film. Have you seen it, Anne?
I have seen it.
I mean, you're more of a horror fan than I am.
Yes, that's true.
But I hear the film is great. I know that Martin Scorsese raves about it. But what do you think? Does it in any way qualify as a noir?
I can. There is, I mean, I think in the issue of the femme fatale, there is a femme fatale, but it's a man.
And an homme fatale.
Yeah, an homme fatale, and that is Pele, who is the friend that convinces his American friends to come over for the festival. And he's really, and you see how he and it's interesting because the thing that opens Midsommar is actually this tapestry, right? And that tapestry has these different panels, and it's the whole story. It's the story of the film. It's really funny. So you can't really spoil it, because if you look at the tapestry, it spoils actually everything that actually happens in the film.
Thanks for telling me. Now I'll close my eyes at the beginning.
Yeah, so don't look too close to the tapestry, because it gives things away. But one of the things is that character, and he's in like sort of period clothing, and he's playing a pipe, and his friends are following him because he's he's the Pied Piper.
It's
So
the Pied Piper.
because he's the Pied Piper, and yeah, so I think in that sense, but it is really, I mean, it's just like his director's first film, Hereditary, which
Which I haven't seen either.
oh my God, it's really, both these films are brilliant.
Okay, so I have my homework cut out for me, but not to change the subject.
Yeah.
And Aja, I will get back to you on my thoughts about this movie once I see it.
Yeah.
But I did see a film that you recommended, Flickering Lights. I did watch that this week, and I really enjoyed it. It's so odd how there are just, I'm sure you agree with me on this, Anne. One of the delights of watching foreign films is when there are stories that would never get made in this country.
Yeah.
Or if they were made in this country, they would be kind of stupid. I hate to
Yeah.
say that, but they would take out the things that make it so intriguing. Because that film has some really questionable moments in it.
Mhm.
It's like, well, this is not in the American version. This will not be in the American version. But that's what made the film so special. It's because you just don't know where the hell it's going. And what starts out as a crime film turns into, what it really, it's funny that I'm saying that, because that movie reminded me of nothing so much as like an old 30s Warner Brothers film with Edward G. Robinson and crew, Larceny Incorporated or something, where, or Buy Me That Town or some movie like that, where it's like it starts out as a crime film and then all of a sudden this kind of small town comedy happens in the middle of the movie, but yet it isn't really a comedy because it can go haywire at any moment, right? Yeah. And I love movies where the comedy really does come out of the characters and their interactions with each other, as opposed to just like, hey, we're trying to amuse people, let's do something funny. And you realize it's just slapstick nonsense. But this movie, all the comedy comes out of who these guys are and why they share this weird bond that makes them a family that they can never violate, And that was really great. And all the guys were great in it, and it was great to see Mads Mikkelsen play just this. Oh my God, the idea that guy was in a kitchen cooking with that hair. Yeah. That hair and the cigarettes, that was the most horrifying thing in the movie, was this guy in a kitchen. And he wore the same tank top through the entire movie. I don't think he ever changed his clothes. I don't think he ever took a shower.
Yeah, and what's also interesting about that, which I caught the second time I watched this film, was that when they do the flashback of when he's a kid, he's wearing the same clothes.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I mean, and I loved that.
It was hysterical. And man, the casting of those guys as kids was remarkable.
Yeah.
Because that guy who played him as a boy looked like him.
Yeah.
How did they do that? He had the same kind of tight face and the same really intense eyes. Anyway, if people haven't seen this, we're encouraging them to see it, but let's not spoil it.
Yeah. Why is it that car chases in mini noirs and other films from the 30s and 40s are often sped up and played ridiculously fast, with cars skidding around corners and darting around obstacles at ludicrously high speed? It seems to be particularly common in B movies. Surely this looked as funny to contemporary audiences as it does now.
I wonder about that. I wonder if audiences back then didn't just accept it as, oh, well, that car was going too fast. It does look fake. And the reason that they do it is because they're 9 times out of 10, they're using stock footage when that is the case. Yeah. And the stock footage may match what they're showing in the film, right? Yeah. Like it's night, it's a street, it's rainy. They don't have the money to shoot it themselves, so they find stock footage, but the car isn't going fast enough. So they speed up the film so that when they do cut to the crash, then you understand that the car was going too fast. If the car is just going at a normal speed and there's a crash, it's like, why didn't the guy avoid the crash?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the reason why. It's usually stock footage where you see that happening. And it's because they had to match it, but the car wasn't going fast enough.
And this one is, did you ever meet or interview Hume Cronyn? I've always been a fan of his. He was still active up until his death in 2003, and I wondered if you ever got him to speak, if you ever got to speak to him about his noir work. And this is from Dave, funny. By the way.
That's funny, Dave. Yes, I met Hume Cronyn in a Greek restaurant on the Upper East Side of New York with Jessica Tandy.
Oh, wow.
On Valentine's Day, no less. Oh. I was with Kathleen, and we were in New York having Valentine's Day dinner. And as I got up to leave, there was Hume Cronyn and Jessica Tandy, and I had to go over and say something. And of course, being me, I said, you know, my favorite performance of yours is as Captain Muncie in Brute Force. and he lit up like a Christmas tree. You know, it's like, you know that film. Oh my gosh, you know that film. Oh my. He said, can you believe that's the most villainous character ever, you know? And I said, oh my God, it was such great casting, you know? And he was into it, you know? He said, yeah, because he was a small man. He was a small man, the captain, you know? He said, and there was really, I'm so happy that Mark Hellinger, you know, saw it that way and let me play the part. He was really enthusiastic about it. And she was very patient because it was like, Miss Tandy, I love your work too, you know, but you never made a film noir. Anyway, yeah, that was a very, very fun memory.
Dear Eddie and Anne, I finally worked up the courage to ask my question. I'm not a student of film, just a fan. And I was wondering if the question that occurred to my husband and me while watching movies are too banal or shallow to be addressed as in an Ask Eddie segment. My husband swears it's only peak noir if a man calls a woman he's not related to sister in an agitated manner. So you can see why I might have that concern. I wonder if movie fans like my husband and I might enjoy noir as much or more than serious students of the film. So let's go back to you. What do you think? Is it only noir if they?
It's only noir if the guy calls a woman sister.
Sister.
Listen, sister. The answer is no, but that's a good observation. You know? I mean, it's funny because when you were reading that, I honestly thought that you were going to say, if a man calls a woman baby.
Yeah,
I thought that's what was coming, and I was amused that it was sister instead, you know, because if you like go to Double Indemnity and count how many times Walter calls Phyllis baby, in that movie, I mean it's kind of incredible, and you know, only rock and roll has more babies in it than noir, you know, but sister is great. Listen, sister. You know, but it's funny. I think sister is less. Baby connotes between the characters connotes some kind of intimacy.
Right.
When the guy calls the woman baby, listen, baby. You know, but sister is just like for waitresses and receptionists and everything. You know, I mean, it's like a less intimate thing. Come on, sister. Can I get some coffee over here? Hey, sister, can I get some coffee over here? You know, so, you know, he wouldn't say, hey, baby, give me some coffee, you know. Anyway, that's all.
Yeah, well, no, but I think we should try and bring back sister. I would love it if people started calling me that.
It's funny because, you know, brother is really common. Brothers is super common. Guys call each other brother all the time. You know, listen, brother, you know, and, but, you know, sister in you know, in Black culture is very common, brother and sister, of course, you know, but you and brother has kind of seeped out into the culture at large, but sister, I don't think has.
No, I mean, no, I think the only people that's called me sister outside of my actual brothers has been African Americans,
yeah.
and Mama too, but
Mhm.
I haven't gotten that from anybody else. Okay, so I want to go back to this because I really, I love this letter. So as we covered the sister thing, I wonder if movie fans like
more.
I wonder if movie fans like my husband and I might enjoy noir as much or more than serious students of the films. We aren't looking to dissect them, just watch. But these Ask Eddies always give me a different way to look at the movies I've enjoyed forever, and often new movies to seek out. Thank you for that. Something that's always bothered me was actually asked about in the October 22nd Ask Eddie. That weird wolf whistle in DOA is one we remark on every time we've seen it. It takes me out of the movie, so jarring and as you say, cartoonish. I also have difficulty watching The Third Man because the zither music nearly drives me mad. I rewatched it a couple weeks ago on Noir Alley and I had the same reaction. Can you think of other noirs where the music either greatly enhances or detracts from the story?
Wow, that's interesting. I admire the Carol Reed's decision to use the zither exclusively for that score. It was risky, and it obviously paid off because it was the theme was a colossal hit and made Anton Karas's career. And the wolf whistle is ridiculous. Generally, it's not a weird out of left field score that irritates me so much as it's a real syrupy score. Those are the ones that I have problems with. I don't like, I think it's William Lava is the composer. I don't like the score for Moonrise, which is otherwise one of my favorite films. I just think the score is really overwrought and I wish that Franz Waxman or Miklos Rozsa or somebody had written the score and sorry, William Lava, I hope your family isn't listening. But that's one that comes to mind. How about you? Are there any where the score is just like, ay?
No, not that I can think of. Which is, I mean, scores are a strange thing because sometimes too, like I also don't like them to be too prominent.
Yeah.
Like that can be really distracting, even though they might be really beautiful, but it's like it's too much scoring and it kind of, I think scoring is one of those things that it just needs to tell the story.
I think that nothing has probably changed more in movies from the classic era to today than film scoring.
Yeah.
It's like a totally different thing now, and I think it's much better. Not that I don't love all those Max Steiner scores and everything. They're great as music, right? But I agree with you. A film score shouldn't be obvious. And I love a score that just works, is totally integrated into what you're seeing and you're almost oblivious to it. It's just part of the experience. And I think composers have certainly mastered that now, much more so than like this one I was talking about on Moonrise. I'll tell you one score that totally made me ill was Eyes Wide Shut, the Kubrick film. I've that piano score with the one note incessantly. I felt like somebody was hammering nails into my head. It was like, make this stop.
Yeah, it was.
That was just horrible.
It did not start. Yeah, and it's kind of interesting just too that it's so much that because it's also the cinematography and the editing and all those things. It's just like everything needs sort of the story and also the screenplay, right? Like you have to be willing to cut certain scenes or whatever because it's not really moving the story forward, and the acting performances. It has to be all that really together because I think especially since I had a real striking example that way. I was watching a film called Open Hearts, which was amazing. But it was shot in the Dogma period. And that style did such a disservice to that film. That film, I mean, I think that film, I mean, it was a great film anyway because the performances and the writing was so good, but it detracted from it because they were so set on following these like rules. And it's the same thing with horror films now. There's a lot of found footage films and they suck. Okay, I don't want to watch shaky camera work for 2.5 hours. It doesn't make it more realistic. And I think that's the thing about what makes a film realistic is not shaky cameras or poor lighting or not rehearsing enough or not having an actual script, because that's just not how it works. It's realistic if you get pulled into the story and pulled into the characters, and those characters make emotional sense. So even if the things going on around them is crazy, like being chased by a guy with a machete, the films that work like that are ones where the characters are behaving in a way that has an internal logic.
I totally agree. I totally agree with that. And every movie has its own internal logic.
Yeah.
So it can be unbelievable, right? And not realistic. But if they succeed in creating an internal logic for the movie where this is the world in which this is happening, and you buy into it and believe it, and you can buy in for any number of reasons. It's just generally when everything works, right? Then it's like, oh, this is the place where this is happening. It doesn't necessarily conform to your reality, but you're buying the internal logic of the movie. I love films like that. There is one composer now, Alexandre Desplat, who I really love, who writes scores in a very traditional classic way. His score for Polanski's Ghost Rider is just amazingly good. So I like he's like always getting nominated for Oscars and everything. And I do like the stuff that, Trent Reznor and Atticus Finch that are doing these scores now. They're terrific. They're great. Who knew that, Nine Inch Nails was going to become like one of the great film score guys of all time.
Danny Elfman was, an Oingo Boingo, so.
Well, I have all the Oingo Boingo albums. It's a dead man's party. Who could ask for more? Yeah, so I have all those albums, and he doesn't read music.
He doesn't. That really? Oh my God! Wow.
I mean, that was the legendary thing when he started doing film scores, is that he just did it all by feel and all this, and he doesn't write music. He doesn't notate.
He can't notate. Oh my God.
I mean, that may be different now. I assume that he does this so often now that he has to be able to give, charts to the musicians in the studio, I would assume. But when he started out, he did not. Oh. Anyway, okay, that's enough with the film scoring.
Okay, so why don't we wrap up here, because we've been going, I think, for quite some time. And so yeah, we're getting.
How are we doing? Do we still have like a ton more questions?
No, not that bad. Just a couple more.
Oh, do we want to do the couple more and then start fresh? Okay, let's do it. And we'll knock these out kind of quick.
Okay, and this is Lauren Ahinashi from Chicago. I wanted to talk to you about. No, we've done this one before.
I know that Lauren has asked questions before.
Yeah, no, but I think no, I'm pretty sure we did this one before, actually.
Okay.
Okay, let's skip it, and then I'll double check, and if we haven't done before, we'll put it in next time.
And now, the last question.
I finally got around to watching Active Violence. This is good timing. Beyond the film's many inherent good qualities, I was struck with watching the number of films which seemed to me to borrow or pay homage to acts of violence. Robert Ryan's slow, implacable pursuit of Van Heflin brought to mind Yul Brynner in Westworld. Heflin and Janet Leigh watch Ryan parked in a car outside their home, and there was a shot of a cigarette being lit in the car, which seems close to Raymond Burr's glowing cigar ash in rear window. Janet Leigh stepping out of her back door to see Ryan step into her garden in a mid shot reminded me of a similarly staged shot of Michael Myers stepping out from behind a hedge and being seen by Laurie in Halloween. And the final confrontation between Ryan and Heflin has the sound of a train going on to deafening pitch on the soundtrack, like the sounds that play over Al Pacino psyching himself for the double assassination of The Godfather. I wonder if these influences have been acknowledged, or if active violence has been cited in general as a touchstone by later filmmakers.
All right. Well, I'm going to answer it this way. when I introduced the movie on TCM, I'm going to say it's one of the original Stalker films. So it's interesting that this person cites a couple of examples of,
Yeah.
Stalker movies
Yeah.
as potential influences. I think the way this stuff actually works is there is no way to draw a direct line between any of these things.
Yeah.
Hollywood back then was a small town, and movies get made, and the good stuff just gets absorbed and it gets repurposed and reused without credit, of course.
Yeah.
And then next thing you know is 5 or 6 years later, it's a trope. It's
Yeah.
suddenly a common thing, and there is no way to trace this back to its origin. It's just like you recognize it, you see it, it's like, oh, there's another example of that. And I've been doing this for long enough now that I know you're going to go crazy going down that rabbit hole if the purpose is to try to trace it back to the source.
Yeah.
My noir archaeology has limits. It's enough to like recognize that, oh, this is a really interesting thing because you see it in virtually every decade. There's something, and I'm sure that you could go back and find examples of every single thing that was just mentioned in act of violence preceded by something like it in an earlier film. So it's so funny because, when I wrote Dark City, I fell into that trap of trying to say, this is where it originated. And then, 10 years later, you see a movie where you go, oops.
Yeah.
Here it is, 10 years earlier. And it's an organic thing. You put it out there and then it's in the world and then other people are going to pick it up and use it. This is how language develops. This is how visual symbols develop. This is how storytelling works. It just gets appropriated, and that's a good thing, and man, Act of Violence is damn near perfect movie. So there's a lot of stuff in there that's worth appropriating.
Yeah, yeah. And I think also, with film too, a lot of times there's the film that really sets off a genre into where everybody's copying it. Like Halloween's a perfect example of that. After Halloween, it set off that entire 80s slasher film things. But there were several really important films before that, like Black Christmas and some other things. And then even before that, there was a whole genre in Italy of their crime films that had those things. So it's
the Giallo films,
the Giallo films, right? I mean, that was a whole thing, and they had huge influence. So that's the thing too, is it's also, and I think that, like with film noir, there's some films that we've talked about, and people always want to get into what's the first film noir. Around, it's like, well, there was the films that sort of set off everybody making more of them because they made a lot of money, which weren't necessarily really the first film noirs.
Exactly. And you just hit the nail on the head. Why was Halloween so influential? Because it was a blockbuster, an unexpected blockbuster. And it was like, man, this didn't cost anything. And look at all the money it made.
Yeah.
There you go. That one's going to create a lot more.
And I think one of the things too that's also important about Halloween was how well it made it was. Okay. That was an exceptional film. I mean, and also, the interesting thing that is it's done on a small budget, but the majority of the budget was spent on the lenses for the camera, the film stock, and he wanted to process at MGM because they had the best processing lab.
Yeah. Well, I know you're a John Carpenter fan. I know you're a big John Carpenter fan. So yeah.
So it also, but that's why it also looks so much better than the other films.
Oh yeah, and also you touched on the most crucial point. People say, what started the film noir movement, and people say, well, was it the Maltese Falcon and then you see a film like I Wake Up Screaming, which has all the hallmarks of noir, but it was not a success. Yeah. Nobody really saw that movie. It was not an influential movie. So, although it was made 3 years before Double Indemnity, it's nowhere near as influential
Yeah.
in creating the film noir movement as Double Indemnity, because that had big stars. I mean, no offense to Victor Mature and Betty Grable,
Yeah.
but you know, Barbara Stanwyck, Edward G. Robinson, Fred McMurray, and you know, Paramount, and it was nominated for Oscars, and it was huge at the box office. That Double Indemnity was responsible, really, for kicking off the movement. You know, and it has to make money.
Yeah.
That's the key.
Yeah.
Okay, and on that note, I think we should wrap up this installment.
Absolutely.
And then we'll figure out when we'll be back, because I don't know that exactly at this point.
Yeah.
But it will be soon. It will be soon.
And
so keep the questions coming.
And we will ramp back up to having 3 a month. I know April and May were a little dicey, and that was just, you know, like I just had some personal health issues, and we just couldn't do it.
I had issues of my own, Anne, that shall go undiscussed. So,
yes.
But all good now. So I look forward to the next time, and I hope folks enjoyed this one. And I love that comment the woman made about, you know, we're just fans who like watching the movies. We're not experts. And I think that's part of why the Film Noir Foundation and the Noir City festivals have been successful, is because we don't make any distinction. You know, we love serving the hardcore by finding the obscurities, and everyone is welcome in the tent. You know, whether it's the first time you've seen one of these movies, or if you've seen every single thing and now you're looking at, you know, obscure noir from India in the 1950s, we got you covered there too.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's something for everyone.
Exactly. So great, as always, talking to you, Anne. Give Charlotte a little scritch for me. And we'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning in.